The studio lights were bright. The applause was warm. And for a brief second, everything felt routine, until one question shifted the tone of the entire room. Subscribe to The Truth Narrator, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It was supposed to be another promotional stop, another late-night appearance, another charming exchange between a rising Hollywood powerhouse and one of America's most seasoned talk show hosts. But when Florence Pugh sat across from Stephen Colbert on The Late Show, something unexpected unfolded. Not loud, not chaotic, but deeply human and undeniably emotional. Late-night television thrives on rhythm. A practiced monologue, a desk, a guest, a laugh line. The format is predictable by design. That predictability is what makes live moments so powerful when they break pattern. And on this particular night, viewers weren't watching a rehearsed anecdote or a playful plug. They were witnessing something far more personal, unfolding in real time, without edits. Florence Pugh had built a reputation for being fearless on screen. From intense psychological dramas to major studio blockbusters, she carried performances with emotional precision. Off-screen, she was known for her candor. Direct, self-assured, unapologetically herself in interviews. She didn't dodge questions, but she didn't overexpose either. That balance made her compelling. Stephen Colbert, on the other hand, was a master of tone. As host of The Late Show, he balanced satire, intellect, and warmth. He had interviewed presidents, musicians, actors, activists. He understood timing. He understood when to push and when to pivot. And most importantly, he understood live television. That night's episode was like many others. A full audience, a tight schedule, headlines buzzing in the background of the entertainment industry. Florence Pugh was there to promote her latest project, a performance already generating serious conversation. Critics praised her intensity. Fans admired her range. She was entering a new chapter in her career, and the spotlight was brighter than ever. But with that spotlight came scrutiny. In the weeks leading up to the interview, public discussion around Pugh had intensified. Not about her acting, but about her personal life. Social media debates, headlines dissecting her relationships, commentary that drifted far from her work. Florence had addressed the noise before, firmly but calmly. She spoke about boundaries, about autonomy, about respect. The Late Show audience likely expected light conversation. A few jokes, maybe a story from set, perhaps some playful banter about filming challenges. That's how these interviews usually go. The celebrity shares. The host reacts. The crowd laughs. The segment moves on. But interviews are live conversations. And live conversations can turn unexpectedly when authenticity enters the room. Colbert welcomed her with his signature energy. They shook hands. The crowd cheered. Florence smiled, poised and composed. The first minutes flowed easily. They discussed the film, the physical demands of the role, the emotional preparation required. Florence spoke thoughtfully, measured but expressive. Colbert listened carefully, occasionally interjecting with humor that kept the tone buoyant. Then the conversation shifted. It didn't happen abruptly. It was gradual, a transition that seemed natural on the surface. A broader question about fame, about public perception, about how actors navigate constant attention. It was relevant. It was topical. And it was live. The room quieted slightly, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Florence leaned back for a moment before answering. Not defensive, not evasive, just thoughtful. And that pause lingered, because sometimes silence says more than immediate words ever could. Colbert, experienced as he was, appeared aware of the shift. His posture changed subtly. He leaned forward, hands folded. The audience, usually quick to laugh or applaud, remained attentive. Florence began to speak. Calmly, honestly, her voice steady but layered. She wasn't reciting a rehearsed answer. She was responding in the moment. This was no longer just promotional television. This was a conversation about agency, about how narratives are constructed, about how women in Hollywood are often discussed in ways that overshadow their craft. Florence didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She articulated. And yet, the weight of what she was saying carried across the studio. The Late Show has seen political debates, emotional tributes, even moments of grief shared between host and guest. But this was different. It was personal without being sensational, vulnerable without being performative. The audience wasn't uncomfortable. They were attentive, listening. For viewers at home, multitasking or scrolling, something about the tone likely made them look up. Because when a live interview stops feeling scripted, it commands attention. But the most significant moment hadn't even happened yet. Because sometimes, it's not the first question that shifts everything. It's the follow-up. And when Stephen Colbert gently pressed further, asking not as a provocateur, but as someone genuinely curious, the emotional center of the conversation surfaced. What followed would be replayed, quoted, and analyzed. Not because it was explosive, but because it was real. And that reality mattered. What happened next wasn't scandalous. It wasn't dramatic in the traditional late-night sense. But it revealed something about both of them. About how conversations on live television can evolve when both host and guest choose honesty over performance. And just when it seemed the tension might ease, a single exchange deepened the moment even further. Leading up to that appearance on The Late Show, Florence Pugh was navigating one of the most visible transitions of her career. She had already proven herself in critically acclaimed roles, earning award nominations and the respect of directors known for demanding performances. Her presence in films like Little Women and Midsommar had positioned her as one of the most compelling actors of her generation. But with greater recognition came amplified scrutiny. In the months before the interview, headlines surrounding Pugh often blended professional praise with personal commentary. Her performances were dissected in reviews, but so were her relationships. Online discourse grew louder. Debates about her choices, her autonomy, even her maturity circulated widely. The conversation extended beyond film blogs into mainstream entertainment media. Florence didn't remain silent about it. In previous interviews and public statements, she addressed the tone of the coverage directly. She spoke about how invasive commentary can distort a person's reality. She emphasized the importance of boundaries. Her message wasn't combative. It was firm. Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert's Late Show remained a platform known for thoughtful exchanges. Colbert had built his reputation not only on political satire, but on his ability to connect with guests at a human level. He often steered conversations toward deeper themes: grief, resilience, faith, doubt. Viewers had seen him share his own personal losses on air. He wasn't afraid of emotional territory. That context mattered, because when Florence agreed to appear, it wasn't just another stop on a press tour. It was an opportunity to speak in a space where nuance was possible. But live television carries unpredictability. Even the most prepared guest can find themselves responding to a question in a way they hadn't anticipated. Behind the scenes, promotional appearances are typically coordinated carefully. Publicists outline talking points. Time slots are rehearsed. Segments are timed to the minute. But once the cameras are live, conversation takes on a life of its own. In the days before the interview, online chatter intensified. Some fans expressed concern that personal topics might surface. Others hoped Florence would address recent headlines head-on. Speculation built, not about confrontation, but about candor. The Late Show audience that evening likely included fans eager to see her in a relaxed environment. The energy in the studio before taping was reportedly upbeat. Colbert delivered his monologue. The band played. The atmosphere felt typical. Yet the broader cultural climate surrounding celebrity interviews had shifted in recent years. Audiences had grown more aware of how personal questions can cross lines. There was heightened sensitivity around how women in Hollywood are treated during press tours. Viral clips of uncomfortable interviews from past decades circulated frequently online, prompting reflection about boundaries and respect. Florence Pugh represented a generation less willing to tolerate dismissive narratives. She had demonstrated that she would answer questions, but on her own terms. That set the stage. As she walked onto the Late Show set, the applause sign lit up. The handshake was cordial. The first segment moved smoothly. But viewers familiar with the surrounding discourse sensed the potential for something more substantial. Colbert's interviewing style often involves building layers. He begins light, establishes rapport, then gradually shifts toward broader themes. It's a technique that encourages guests to open up naturally. When he began exploring the idea of public perception, how actors experience fame in the social media era, it didn't feel intrusive. It felt topical, relevant, even inevitable. But context shapes interpretation. For Florence, discussions about public perception weren't abstract. They were personal. She had been navigating intense commentary for months. The question wasn't hypothetical. As the conversation edged closer to that territory, subtle changes in body language became visible. Florence maintained composure, but her responses grew more deliberate. Colbert listened closely, giving her space to finish thoughts fully. The audience sensed the shift. The stakes weren't scandalous. They were emotional. Would this become another clip stripped of nuance online? Or would it remain a thoughtful exchange about boundaries and identity? The tension didn't come from hostility. It came from honesty hovering just beneath the surface. Because live television offers something pre-recorded interviews cannot: immediacy. There is no opportunity to revise phrasing. No chance to soften impact in editing. Words land exactly as spoken. And as the discussion deepened, it became clear that Florence was no longer speaking solely as an actor promoting a film. She was speaking as a person responding to public narratives about her life. What happened next wasn't planned controversy. It was the natural outcome of a conversation that touched a nerve. And when Stephen Colbert asked the question that gently but unmistakably brought those narratives into focus, the room seemed to hold its breath. The transition was subtle. Stephen Colbert leaned forward slightly, his tone calm, almost reflective. He referenced how public figures often find their personal lives discussed alongside their professional work. Then he asked Florence how she personally handles that intersection, when attention shifts from craft to private choices. There was no accusation in the question, no sharp edge. It was phrased carefully, but it was direct. For a brief moment, Florence Pugh did not speak. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but on live television, seconds stretch. The audience waited. Colbert didn't interrupt. He maintained eye contact, hands folded on the desk. Florence inhaled, her posture straight but relaxed. When she began, her voice was even. She explained that being in the public, means accepting a certain level of visibility. That much she understood. She chose her profession knowing it came with attention. But she drew a distinction between professional critique and personal speculation. The first she welcomed. The second she found more complicated. Her words were measured. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't emotional in the dramatic sense. But there was weight behind what she said. She described how easily narratives can form online, how headlines can flatten a complex person into a simplified storyline. She noted that when focus shifts away from her work and toward her relationships, it can feel diminishing. The audience was quiet, not tense, just attentive. Colbert nodded, allowing her space to continue. He didn't rush to a joke. He didn't pivot away. Florence's expression softened as she elaborated. She said she believes people are often more interested in constructing stories than understanding individuals. She emphasized that she values privacy, not secrecy, but privacy. The difference mattered to her. At one point, she paused again. This time not from hesitation, but from reflection. She acknowledged that public commentary can affect more than just headlines. It can affect family members, friends, real relationships. And when speculation becomes loud enough, it seeps into everyday life. Her voice wavered slightly, not dramatically, but perceptibly. She maintained composure, but the emotional undercurrent was clear. Colbert responded gently. He reflected back part of what she said, paraphrasing her emphasis on agency. He asked whether she feels the industry is evolving in how it treats young women in particular. That question deepened the moment. Florence considered it carefully. She said she believes progress is happening, but unevenly. Social media has given actors platforms to speak for themselves. At the same time, it has amplified scrutiny. She didn't name specific articles. She didn't reference specific commentators. She spoke broadly, yet the specificity of her experience was evident. Midway through her response, applause began from part of the audience. It wasn't prompted. It wasn't overwhelming, but it signaled agreement. Florence smiled briefly in acknowledgement, then continued. She said something that shifted the tone further, that she hopes conversations about women in film can center on their craft first. That personal life should not eclipse professional achievement. There was no anger in her delivery, only clarity. Colbert let the statement land. He didn't follow immediately with humor. Instead, he asked a final follow-up, quietly. He asked what she would want young actors watching to understand about maintaining boundaries. This time, her answer came without pause. She spoke about self-respect, about knowing when to speak and when to step back, about recognizing that public curiosity does not equal entitlement. The room felt different now. Still, focused, and viewers at home were witnessing it unfiltered. No edits, no cuts, just a conversation unfolding in real time. As the segment neared its end, Colbert thanked her, not in the routine promotional way, but sincerely. He acknowledged her openness. The band prepared to play them out. The audience applauded again, louder this time. But the emotional resonance lingered beyond the applause. Because this wasn't a viral outburst. It wasn't confrontation in the explosive sense. It was something quieter and arguably more powerful. It was a live television moment where a guest asserted boundaries calmly, and a host gave that assertion room to breathe. And if you want to understand what happened after the cameras pulled back and how this exchange reshaped the conversation around celebrity interviews, stay with the Truth Narrator. When the applause faded and the segment transitioned, the energy in the studio remained noticeably subdued. Not somber, but reflective. The band's music felt softer against the emotional tone that had just settled over the audience. Stephen Colbert shifted back into host mode smoothly. Years of experience allowed him to recalibrate without abruptness. He thanked Florence again, this time with a light remark that gently reintroduced levity. The audience responded with appreciative laughter, easing the atmosphere without erasing what had just occurred. Florence smiled, visibly composed. She hadn't appeared rattled. If anything, she seemed steadier after speaking candidly. There was no sign of regret in her expression. No attempt to walk back her words. She had said what she intended to say. In live television, reactions unfold in layers. The studio audience processes first. Then the online audience reacts almost immediately. Clips begin circulating within minutes. Quotes are transcribed. Context is debated. Backstage, segments move quickly. Guests are ushered toward the next promotional obligation. Publicists check phones. Producers monitor social feeds. But the conversation from that interview continued reverberating. Within hours, viewers began sharing excerpts online. Not because of scandal, but because of sincerity. Many highlighted her distinction between privacy and secrecy. Others pointed to Colbert's restraint, his decision not to interrupt or redirect. Media coverage the following day framed the moment as thoughtful rather than contentious. Headlines focused on her call for boundaries in the age of social media. Commentary noted that the exchange felt different from traditional late-night interviews centered on gossip. For Florence, the immediate aftermath didn't involve damage control. There were no clarifying statements issued. No social media corrections. Her words had been clear. For Colbert, the moment reinforced a reputation he had cultivated for years. That the Late Show could accommodate depth as easily as humor. In the broader cultural conversation, the interview landed at a time when audiences were increasingly critical of invasive questioning. Past interview clips from earlier decades often resurface online, prompting reassessment of how celebrities, especially young women, were treated. Against that backdrop, this exchange felt contemporary. Measured, mutually respectful. The studio staff later described the room as unusually attentive during the segment. Not tense, but aware. Live audiences can sense when something unscripted carries weight. They respond instinctively. Florence's composure throughout the conversation became a focal point. She hadn't deflected with sarcasm. She hadn't shut down the topic. She engaged, articulated, and set boundaries simultaneously. In interviews that followed during her press tour, the subject resurfaced briefly. Journalists referenced her Late Show comments, asking if she felt satisfied with how she handled it. She reiterated the same principles: respect for craft, respect for personal space. Nothing about her professional trajectory stalled. If anything, the moment seemed to underscore her reputation for authenticity. For Colbert, the interview joined a catalog of exchanges where emotional depth surfaced unexpectedly. His willingness to allow silence, to let a guest finish without interjecting humor, was noted by media observers. The immediate impact wasn't explosive ratings or controversy. It was subtler, a recalibration of tone, a reminder that late-night television can host meaningful dialogue without sacrificing engagement. As clips continued circulating, viewers who hadn't seen the full episode sought it out. Many commented on how rare it felt to witness a conversation that neither sensationalized nor avoided sensitive territory. And as days turned into weeks, the interview settled into a larger narrative about evolving media dynamics. But the true significance of that evening would only become clear over time. In the months following the interview, Florence Pugh's career continued its upward trajectory. Film premieres, award discussions, and new project announcements dominated headlines. Yet the Late Show exchange remained part of her public narrative. Not as controversy, but as context. The entertainment industry often measures impact through box office numbers and streaming metrics. But cultural impact operates differently. It surfaces in tone shifts, in how questions are framed, in how audiences respond. After that interview, discussions about celebrity boundaries gained renewed visibility. Commentators referenced Florence's words when analyzing broader media practices. Her emphasis on the distinction between public curiosity and personal entitlement resonated beyond her own circumstances. For young actors entering the industry, the moment served as an example of how to navigate difficult questions without antagonism. She demonstrated that clarity can be firm without being combative. Stephen Colbert's role in the exchange also contributed to its staying power. His choice to listen rather than redirect signaled something about the evolving responsibilities of hosts. In an era when viral moments often stem from discomfort, this one stemmed from mutual respect. The Late Show has long balanced humor with introspection. But interviews like this reinforce why live television still matters. The absence of edits means authenticity can't be polished. It arrives unfiltered. For Florence, the long-term impact wasn't about defending herself. It was about defining herself. She continued speaking openly about her craft, emphasizing preparation, collaboration, and storytelling. Personal questions did not disappear from interviews, but the tone often shifted, subtly more mindful. Media scholars later cited moments like this when discussing the transformation of celebrity journalism in the digital age. As audiences grow more media literate, they recognize when interviews cross lines. They also recognize when they don't. The emotional stand on The Late Show didn't involve raised voices or dramatic exits. It involved something quieter, the assertion of agency in a space designed for entertainment. And that is why it still matters. Because culture evolves through incremental shifts, through conversations that model a different way forward, through live moments where honesty outweighs spectacle. Florence Pugh didn't change the industry overnight. Stephen Colbert didn't abandon humor for solemnity. But together, in that exchange, they demonstrated that late-night television can host depth without losing warmth. For viewers watching while cooking dinner, scrolling on their phones, or winding down after work, that moment may have prompted reflection. About how we consume celebrity narratives. About the line between interest and intrusion. And in a media landscape saturated with noise, a calm, thoughtful stand can echo louder than outrage. If you value thoughtful storytelling and in-depth analysis of moments like this, subscribe to The Truth Narrator, hit like, share this video, and join the conversation in the comments below.